So welcome everyone. I'm really excited about today's panel on urban careers. We have a really exciting collection, I would say, of panelists here, very, very diverse backgrounds. So it will hopefully show you students what an enormous, different kind of careers you can be doing if you're interested in any kind of urban related issues. So I'll first give the floor to our Vice Provost, Kristen Day, who will be opening this or introducing our program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lena. It's wonderful to see all of you here. Thank you for making time for this conversation, and thank you in advance to all our panelists for joining us. Before we launch into this conversation, I want to make sure the students are aware of a new opportunity designed especially for you, folks who we hope are interested in opportunities that bring together the urban and the global. So as you know, NYU is a profoundly global place and also deeply urban in our roots. And we think this is something that many of our students share a passion about. So this year, for the first time, we're designing a new global showcase that is intended to highlight students' work that deals with issues that are both global and urban. So the Global Urban Showcase is for undergraduate students who want to submit work for consideration. It can be work of 3 different types. We'll be inviting submissions of longer papers or projects, shorter papers or projects, and creative work that could be of any type that you can submit electronically. So I'm going to paste the chat for the Global Urban Showcase in the, paste the URL in the chat. And I want to let you know that because our opportunities for traveling globally are curtailed this year, we are allowing students to submit work that they might have started at some time in the past. So this might be work that you began when you were studying away, maybe last year, or work that you've undertaken this year, but it should be work that if you did it prior to June 2020, you've had a chance to revisit and improve, upgrade, rethink some of this work and make it even better. So it should be work that you've addressed this year, though you might have started it earlier. So formal submission will be coming to this URL soon, but you can stay posted here for more information. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lena.
Thank you so much. So I first want to introduce just our 4 panelists. As I said, a very diverse group of people from early career to late career, working in many different places all over the world, and also both doing, of course, practice, but also research, and that's research can be from qualitative to quantitative. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Lucinda Hartley. She's an urban designer turned entrepreneur and uses big data to measure the quality of life and well-being of neighborhoods. She's a co-founder of Neighbourlytics, as you can see in her name also here on the screen, a social analytics platform which has created data for more than 500 neighborhoods in over 10 countries, so really all over the world. And she's influencing some of the world's most significant urban development decisions. Lucinda was recently named as one of the 100 women of influence by the Australian Financial Review and one of Melbourne's top 100 most influential people by The Age. So we're very, very honored to have you here, Lucinda. And I understand you might have to leave a little earlier, so please feel free to leave when you have to leave. We're already really happy that you are here. Our second or other panelist is Xinlin Sung. Some know her as Vivian Sung. She is combining her specialism in research journalism, urban studies, and community building. And she's an independent consultant and a network builder based both between the United States and China, back and forth, but also working in China in the US, but also actually in Europe. She has worked on reporting the invisible emerging megacities in China to the European audience and advised public-private partnerships on air quality campaign between the EU and China. Xinlin is currently facilitating a collaborative research between a Chinese prefab innovator and the Y Factory. That's an urban think tank at the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands, on the subjects of sustainable urbanism. And then we have Gabriele Tempesta. He is a multidisciplinary designer with a strong commitment to using design to achieve a thriving society for present and future generations. He started his career actually at Young Design, which is one of China's leading local design studios. And he's leading he was leading the City Innovation Department. Gabriele is now helping urban infrastructure design group SUYI to embed human-centered innovation into their organization as the director of their urban studio, a research and innovation lab aiming to design strategies for more livable, inclusive, and sustainable cities. And finally, last but not least, we have Parul Rewal. She is an architect and urban professional who has been living and working in several different countries from India, South Africa, Singapore, Hong Kong to Shanghai. She has considerable experience designing and executing buildings, very diverse from university campuses to residential, commercial buildings, with an special expertise and experience in the conservation and reuse of urban heritage, something we're doing in my class. And she has a special interest in the urban informal sector and food security and water conservation. She currently serves as the vice president of the Royal Asiatic Society China, where she also convenes a talk series on on architecture and urbanism. It's currently going on, and fascinating famous talkers to build greater dialogue between urban professionals, academics, and citizens. So all four, very, very honored to have you here, very happy and welcome. So I wanted to just start with kind of asking you some questions, if you can like elaborate for a little bit on sort of about your career and, you know, focusing on the work you have done that is, you know, in the urban, of course, also especially your global and international focus. If you can tell us a little bit more about your work. So I would like to start with Lucinda.
Thank you so much, Lena, and thanks so much for having me today. How's the volume? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks so much. Always got to check these days with the various connections. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I think it's a great topic that you're discussing around urbanism and global careers, and I'm really excited also to hear from the other panelists on that topic. For myself, I think I've had 4 careers so far, and probably there'll be more to come. I read recently that Gen Ys will have up to 17 different jobs. So I began my career as a landscape architect, urban designer. That's my training. But I came to that from the perspective of growing up very much as a global citizen. I grew up living in 8 different countries. I'm what you might call I'm Australian, I guess, by passport, but I'm what you might call a third culture kid. I grew up in many different places, particularly in Kenya and Zimbabwe, most of my teenage years. And from that experience, I really learned firsthand that your neighborhood, the place that you live, fundamentally influences the opportunities that you have in life. And I saw that relationship, albeit passively, between built environment and opportunity very, very tangibly. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that story of how we created neighborhoods to deliver better social outcomes for people. But I didn't really quite know how to do that initially. Urban design, I thought, was going to be this fantastic sort of place for that to happen, and it can be. But I found in my first job, I spent 3 years of my life designing the concrete intersections of the big stadium in Melbourne. Now, someone has to do that. Details are very important, but I found that was quite a frustrating process for someone who's quite a big thinker and wanted to be involved in change. So that was career number 1, where I learned some really fantastic foundational technical skills, but also realized that I'm much more interested in the systems change than I am in the detailing of the cement aggregate. The second chapter, I then had an opportunity which was first through an appointed elected position and then turned into a job with UN Habitat. So this is the time around 2007, 2009, where the Sustainable Development Goals were being shaped. And I had a role as the Global Youth Liaison, helping work with young people around the world around their input into Goal 11 on cities. And that was a really, what I learned from that chapter was One, I guess, if you really want to change the system, you need to change the objective or the goal that you're working towards. And so if your goal is towards project delivery and efficiency, and that's what you'll get. If your goal is towards environmental sustainability and social outcomes, then that's what you'll get. And I think that's very much what the Sustainable Development Goals exist to help achieve. And it was really a great privilege to be able to work with, I was then a young person, young people around the world to engage critical voices on what those goals needed to be. Chapter 2. Chapter 3, I came back to Australia then, and I think saw my own neighbourhood with new eyes, having had sort of recent global experiences. The work with UN Habitat I did mostly in Southeast Asia and in Kenya. And I think in countries like Australia, which is common to a lot of still rapidly growing, highly urbanised cities in the world, which have, I guess, a high level of development in some sense, but higher inequality in some other areas. And certainly the expression in Australian landscape is we have a pandemic of loneliness and social isolation, and where the expansion of our cities, 1 in 3 people don't know their neighbours. Loneliness is as likely to kill you as heart disease in Australia. So this is sort of something that was fundamentally problematic for me as someone who's passionate about urban issues, and started a placemaking consultancy called Co-Design Studio that was very much working on collaborative placemaking projects, helping communities to connect around local neighbourhood projects. And you know, it's exciting that placemaking, I think, is very much forefront of the urban agenda now, less so sort of 10 years ago. But all of that really led me to what I'm doing now at Neighbourlytics, is that, you know, ultimately, if we can't manage the change, if we can't measure the change that we're creating, it's very difficult for us to manage it. And most of the great outcomes that we create as city makers are often it's often less about the building, and often it's more about the social interactions or the business ecosystem or the innovation that we've created. And that often goes unmeasured. And it's very difficult to measure that qualitatively. You can do surveys, but you can do it for only one project at a time, not sort of globally on demand and perpetually measuring to see change over time. So we created Neighbourlytics, which is a social analytics platform for neighbourhoods. We harness a whole range of digital data about how people interact with their built environment every day to create metrics of how places are being used and provide data sets around social outcomes. So that's what I'm currently focusing on, which I guess is an aligned kind of urban topic, but I'm not sure that I call myself an urban designer anymore. And it's really great, I think, to be able to see so many different applications of urban design outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. That's the difference between qualitative and quantitative, what you can do with the one and what we can do with the others. Some of my courses also discuss. So there will be some time for Q&A also for students, so you can think about questions maybe about that. So Xinlin, would you like to introduce your career?
Yes, thank you. So nice to be here. It was very inspiring to hear Lucinda's experiences. I feel resonant a lot. Starting a little bit about my grown-up experience, because it has a lot to do with how I approach the cities. I grown up in a communist commune. It's basically a very trust-based, a small scale community where everyone knows each other or each other's families. I can knock anyone's door to say, oh, I need some food, or I don't want to stay home, I'm lonely, or everything. So I grown up in this very trust easy environment that led me to think that all cities should be like this, but probably wasn't. But my city, the city I was grown up with is called Shijiazhuang, English maybe rock hometown. It's very small, but it had some international fame. One of the things I noticed it shocked me the most is when I read The Lonely Planet about my city. It says the city is basically a culture desert. That's the first opening sentence of my city in Lonely Planet. But I didn't think so. My city was the hometown for rock music in China, in the northern China actually. And then I was wondering, how do you really know the city? How do you really know the city, know what is really going on in the city? I have studied education. It's nothing to do with urban study, but I came in as a journalist, started working with a journalist and an architect, both from the Netherlands, since graduation in 2009, and started to travel with them to all the second-tier cities in China, trying to really understand the urbanization topics of the emerging second-tier cities, which is also invisible because it was, you know, when you talk about China, you know Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, but you very rarely know Guiyang, Changsha, Wuhan, or Shijiazhuang, or Huhe, Haote, all the city. But the city is really growing fast with a lot of happening, GDP really high, a lot of new populations, but really what is going on there? So, so that 3-year experience has basically become my urban retraining into this field. And so it was very much, it's not a database, but it's very, it's a warm data or qualitative database. And then later on, I started working with the Hong Kong University in Shanghai and assisting curating curating shows and public events about the urbanism in China, but also in between Chinese language and English language to discuss these issues with foreign-speaking architects, planners, developers living in Shanghai. And the previous Go West projects with the city studying projects when become a book in Dutch, published in Holland, also introducing the cities to the European audience. So I guess my career was always in between cultures, between China and Europe or China and America. And later on, I started working with AMO, it's Office of Metropolitan Architecture's think tank, working on a research introducing a Chinese countryside issues to the global audience that turned into a show at the Guggenheim just closed, I guess, this month. It's called The Countryside, the Future. It was interesting that it's not about urban, because how Ramku has this, the curator of the show, how he scoped the countryside is anywhere beyond urban. But for my work in this show was to introduce the countryside of China to the urban audience in New York. And I find there is an incredible urban link within my work and how the work is perceived. And finally, right now, I'm still working between China and Europe in sustainability and nature-based solutions, and how do we move into the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this working in between cultures is definitely something we'll be coming back to. And I also love to see how actually both of you, right, were also very much already inspired, or questions about the urban were raised during your childhood, during the places where you grew up. So it's interesting to see those links, right? So third, I'd like to give the floor to Gabriele, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your career path. And you know, we have been seeing how, you know, all these different stages of both Lucinda and Xinlin.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, first of all, hi everyone, and thank you for the invitation. I must say I feel really humbled to be here because, well, I mean, I'm actually not even from the urban industry, if we can call it like that, because my background was actually industrial design, and I grew up in a small city in Italy called Bari, and which was a very human-sized, human-centered city, very, very lively. Then I studied in Milan, which is a bit less human-centered city than compared to Bari, but still quite small compared to China. And so I studied industrial design by background, and then I was really enjoying it until basically I realized what is behind mass production, what's the real cost of creating these industrial products. And then I basically developed an identity crisis, which is still ongoing, so I haven't recovered fully. And yeah, then I asked myself, okay, how can I use design in a more responsible way? How can I use design to solve bigger problems? So I think I can relate to Lucinda, to working on more systemic issues. So I started exploring some other fields of design, like sustainable product design at first, then how to turn products into services, and then exploring design for behavior change and human-centered design, and a number of other fields in trying to find answers But back then, when I basically entered the job market, those topics weren't really very widespread. So I couldn't find a company, for example, working on transitioning from products to services. Now it's the hot topic, but I think 4 years ago wasn't so much popular. So for a number of reasons, I ended up in China. I was already there in 2010 and 2011. I did an internship there. And I was really impressed by how dynamic this country is. And the thing about China is that they really have some kind of agenda or like a strong intent to change some stuff, at least for the better, at least in words. But I can see that in most cases, they try to follow up on what they're doing. It's not just empty talking like the Italian government tends sometimes to be famous for, like lots of slogans, but then there is nothing that comes out. So I was happy to see that, and lots of problems to solve. So I figured, okay, maybe I can start my career in China to try to see if I can solve some problems. But then I found this company called Young Design. It was a design studio like many, but the unique thing that they had is that they worked on, they had one team dedicated on like basically public design, so designing products and like city furniture, signage. So these small things that define smaller spaces in the city, but still contribute to your experience as a citizen. And so I've been working on a number of projects like designing systems of city furniture for different cities that kind of like reflect the local culture, but also provide a good experience to citizens through very small details, even something like materials, like for example, using wood rather than metal on seats so that during summer you don't burn your ass and, you know, or you don't get frozen and stuff like this. And also I had the chance to work on some social projects too for some, there is one foundation called One Foundation, actually, Ijijin, and we worked on helping children in rural areas to develop the habit of drinking water, and we developed like some simple, affordable solutions to solve that problem. So it was a very fun ride. And then 5 years later, so now in 2019, I joined SUYI because I still wanted to work on the city scale, but I wanted to work on a bit larger scope. So this company, it's a newly founded company that combines different disciplines. So they have architecture, urban planning, and also very hardcore infrastructure like roads and pipes and municipality projects, etc. And so we are trying to bring the topics of sustainable design, human-centered design, and inclusive design to how these people work. And for example, some of the things we do is we jump in whenever there is a project, for example, renovating a road or a space, we jump in, we try to really develop a deeper understanding of who is living there, how is people using the space and why, what problems they are facing on a day-to-day basis. And then we try to report these findings to the design teams and let them take a better, more informed and human-centered decisions throughout the design process, rather than just, you know, jumping to concept and just working based on assumptions. So this is kind of like my career. Maybe I wouldn't say like so global, but the problems I hope to solve are actually quite global. So that's kind of like the mini summary.
Thank you. I didn't need the modest introduction. I think we also on purpose actually invited panelists with very different backgrounds to show students that you don't necessarily need to study urban studies or urban sociology or architecture. You can actually very different kind of, coming from very different kind of fields, but still, because of course, urbanization is really the biggest challenge we're facing today, which has as much to do with the countryside as Xinlin was also pointing out. Those two, of course, impact each other. So that's why we wanted to see this, you know, show this diversity, both in backgrounds and where you can finally end up, right? So that brings me to our final panelist, Parul, if you want to introduce a little bit more about your background as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lena. So, you know, majority of my career has been as an architect, and I've had the good fortune of being able to live and work in different places in the world. But, you know, coming from India, it sort of, after a while, it sort of felt very frustrating. You know, it felt pointless to be building and designing buildings when cities were in such shambles, you know, and Indian cities suffer from a shocking lack of infrastructure. Things don't work, it rains, the cities flood, there's congestion. So quite late in my architectural career, almost 20 years into it, I kind of made a foray into the urban, deciding to do a postgrad in urban management. So that's sort of, just to widen the scope of work. And this encompassed governance and policy and urban finance, infrastructure, energy, all that. So having done that, I got pulled into some global urban research projects. And one of them was the NYU Stern Urban Expansion Program. And I joined as a city-based researcher for Hong Kong, which is where I was living at the moment. And that was great because, for once, as a planner, most urban theoretical frameworks, planning frameworks originate in the West, whereas in cities of the global South, the ground realities are very different. We don't have neat little suburbs, at the periphery of cities. These are teeming with, paradox. So it was great to be part of that, looking at the quality and quantity of quantity and quality of urbanization at the periphery, looking at housing affordability, and so it was wonderful to be part of that, to sort of, realize that there is long-term strategies possible which address, how to urbanize in a sort of orderly and equitable way, for expansion at the peripheries. I also became part of the UN Habitat global municipal database, which looked at, urban finance across a global sample of cities. Looking at what component of the budgets go into, sort of providing various things, safety and security of cities, into infrastructure, into streets, into, waste disposal management. And that sort of comes together into a handbook of finance for city leaders. So those were very interesting experiences. For me, I had an overriding interest in the urban informal sector. Again, coming from India, that's a very large part. You have slum and squatter settlements all over cities. It's also a large part of the informal economy. I wish I'd known Lucinda at that point of time, because I did a project about how people perceive the urban informal sector, because in academia we seem to value it and we understand the importance of this sector, but how do actually people perceive the informal sector, whether it's something they value or is it something that they feel is just a nuisance in cities? And I was hoping to find that it validated my sense of value for the informal sector. And frankly, we did an extensive survey and it was a very interesting process, but I wish I had, Lucinda's sort of analytical kind of tools at that point in time to have validated this in a different manner. So I was all set to actually start my NGO back in India, where my main idea was to try and execute sort of sustainable neighborhood projects, which could be replicated then as a model and which could be replicated across the city. But then we decided to move to China with my husband's job. And China was like a fascinating, it was a wonderful place to come in because it really is the hotbed of urbanization. And there's just so much happening in the urban arena in terms of, eco-cities and urban and rural heritage. But also on the other hand, it's also a lot of it is government run, and it's not easy to come across information about what is happening behind the scenes. It's not so transparent. But what was wonderful about coming to Shanghai is that I got to interact suddenly with a lot of startups that were involved in environment, in urban issues, in recycling, in urban farming. And that was, I call it the stage of sort of collecting ideas for India. And it's also brought a shift in my architectural practice. I have a small architectural practice that I still run remotely in India. And that sort of expanded to include a whole lot of, urban sustainability angles. So currently I'm building a cluster of homestays in rural Uttarakhand, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's a cluster of homes. And we are sort of, working with the intention of kind of pulling in the local community to create better work opportunities for them, targeting the plastics and the deforestation that's occurring in the area, trying to pull in, promote the local crafts and, folk art that exists in that sort of zone. So I think, it's come to encompass a whole lot of these kind of, holistic urban angle.
Thank you so much.
And of course, I run the talk series for the Royal Asiatic Society, the Architecture and Urbanism series, which has been very fulfilling because it's a way of building dialogue between professionals and academics. And I believe very strongly that, there's a lot of great work being done in academia, but it stays in academic circles. And it's very important to kind of bring this to lay people.
Can I invite our students at NYU Shanghai actually for
Absolutely. They're more than welcome to join.
I will share the information. That's great.
I'll put you on my newsletter.
Fantastic lecture series. So thank you all for so much. So we really could see, right, that it's, when we think about urban issues, so much more than urban design and architecture alone, right? We heard the same sort of words coming back, like livable, right? What makes a city livable? Sustainability came back, a human-centered came back a lot. Life quality, community, social change, social inequality. So you see that, you can approach from so many different perspectives. So to come back to the careers, because that's, we want to kind of have our students think about possible careers. So I want to ask each panelist, and you can also respond to each other if you want, of course, if you can just name one quality or knowledge or experience that you think is important for those students who are aspiring a career in urban issues, but in a global international context, especially because you all four have been working in this international context. Is there one speaker who would like to respond to that first? Or?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
So one quality, knowledge or experience that you think is important for people who want an urban career in a global context. And Lucinda, I saw you raising.
I mean, it's a difficult question because there's probably many, many things, but my overall takeaway, and I would love to hear from the other panelists on this too, is what I really look for is people's ability to solve problems. I actually rarely look for technical skills. I think you can learn technical skills on the job. I mean, it's important to have, and I think many people here have spoken to the various different career journeys. Like, I didn't know how to run a technology company before running a technology company. I didn't know about data analytics before learning, but I think what I look for in others is their ability to identify problems, to know to look for how they might need to solve them. And I think there are so many very, very complex, very systemic problems around global cities that will require people to think really broadly and laterally and creatively about how they go about problem solving.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
just Gabriele.
Lady first.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can just yes. Go
I would say the ability to work in teams is very important because at an urban scale, it is rarely that you can solve a problem alone. And I think to be able to tap into other knowledge skills, and also to be able to see the interconnectedness of issues, like, for example, if you look at the water supply system of, if you look at the vulnerabilities in the water supply system of a city like Hong Kong, you discover suddenly that the water department is the biggest consumer of electricity in the city. And therefore, when you're trying to address, energy conservation, that would become seeing the interconnectedness in the whole of various things that come together in the urban cosmology, as I call it, and to be able to work with other people who bring in different, plug in their skill sets to solving problems together.
Great. And Gabriele?
Okay, yeah, I want to tie in with both of those topics because I think, the ability of solving problems and framing problems is extremely important. I mean, that we are solving the right issue because, when it comes to cities, there are lots of complex interconnected problems, and it's hard to figure out where to start. Maybe you are solving the wrong thing. And so as a designer, what the quality that I think is quite important is it's actually a mix, cannot just name one, but I think they're all related together. I think it's about being curious and have a deeper empathy for citizens, because at the end of the day, no matter which city you work in or no matter which field you work in, the key ingredient of cities is people. And so we need to develop a deeper understanding of peoples at different scales. So I think quantitative data is absolutely important. And then once we identify, basically quantitative data gives you a feeling of like the main hotspots or like the patterns that you begin to see. But then you need to also try to find a way to dig in and understand why those patterns occur. And that can be done by blending some qualitative research, which is something that now we are trying to bring to this company. So really getting out of your chair and talking to citizens, understanding like how they use the space, why they behave like they behave, and finding good ways to understand what is really troubling them. And then most importantly, the thing is to validate your assumptions, because I think one of the maybe most dangerous things in any design discipline is assumptions. If you just assume, oh, people are like that and they're gonna love my design, they're gonna love this neighborhood, without having any validation, then you are basically destroying the life of millions of people just based on your own foolish assumptions. So always challenge your assumptions and find the curiosity, the empathy, and the humility to talk to actual, real, living, breathing people, and then hear what they have to say using the right methods, of course, because it's another whole topic, like how to get those insights and then feed it back in the design process.
Yes, absolutely. Something I also always say to my students. Xinlin.
Yes, it's very hard to be the last one because they have all done so well, and I totally agree. And I also want to just emphasize on this word context. And to work in urban issues, and you do have to have the ability and the toolkits to understand the context of such issue happened. Well, first of all, as what Gabriele just said, and do not too quickly make assumptions of what things is, and then to ask questions and understanding how does issues happen in this particular place. So for example, I studied urban sociology in Goldsmiths in London, which is, you know, urban, a bit left wing, and it has a lot of battling against gentrification, urban gentrification. And then I carry that lens, I carry that knowledge back to Shanghai, and I'm looking at Shanghai, I look at everywhere, it's basically gentrifying city all over. But when I start asking people, when I start doing researches, and then I find out that the context is different. The urbanization process in China is really fast. And it's hard to, it's a very interesting question, what is history in this such a fast growing city in China? So when you deal with something that grows so fast, it changes so fast, history becomes transient, history becomes fast pacing. And the context where you study the change of the city is different from the context where I study change in London. And just a small example. So I want to remind us to look at the context, particular local context where you study.
Great, thank you. Before I ask also a last question, I want to say to the students, if you have a question for one of the panelists or all the panelists, just type in the chat box to everyone, and then we can read your question. So yeah, I finally wanted to ask just again the panelists, and again also feel free to respond to each other if you agree or disagree, but I was just wondering if you could say either something that you think is a really great opportunity if students, you know, aspire careers in urban issues, again, most also in the global context, right? Or if there's also something you would actually caution them for. So either something you want to recommend or something you say like, oh, be careful for that. So one of those, so yeah, for the panelists. And I don't know, shall we, someone would, Lucinda, would you like to start again, or just stick to the same order? Unless people respond to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. this is one of my favorite topics, but I think there's never been a more important time to be working in cities. If you think about the kind of global challenge of urbanization in the next 30 years, like that's kind of our kind of career length. It's been, I feel that in many ways cities has kind of been a fringe agenda. At least 20 years ago, it was kind of like there was all of these thematic issues and then there was cities, and now it's like all of the thematic issues are also urban issues because of the global population. And I think if anything, COVID has accelerated that conversation, where cities and neighborhoods is at the forefront of everyone's experience, sometimes for the first time. Certainly it's on the agenda for policy and planning in a way that it wasn't, at least my observation is that it wasn't 12 months ago. So I think that's a huge opportunity, but there's so many different ways that can play out. I mean, it can be like formally in sort of urban studies, urban design, and sort of built environment professions, but it can also be tackled from so many other angles, but just looking at it through the urban lens. And so I think just it's probably the important thing that I would recommend is to be seeing almost every issue, even if it's a rural issue, it probably has to do with some sort of rural-urban divide or rural-urban transition. Almost every issue can be framed in that city's context. And so I think it's always really important to have that as a sort of a cross-cutting theme that's considered, even if you're not directly looking at it as an urban professional.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. That links also with what Xinlin was saying, right? Parul, if you have like one short advice, what would you recommend or caution?
Oh, caution. I think, yeah, one has to just keep very focused and think of how cities, I mean, really people are what makes cities. And I think one needs to be focused on that. And like, Shanghai pointed out about gentrification, we have to be really cautious that we're not, turning cities into these large scale gentrified sort of, that's just something that needs to be at the core of your, consciousness. Yeah, great. And if I may, I don't know if I wanted to just, if you will permit me to play a 2-minute film on Shanghai.
Because we want to move on also to, we
yes,
still
maybe we do it at the end. Let's get on with it. But just to bring this point forward, I have a 2-minute short film and I'd love to play that.
Because we also still have the Urban Career Development Center from NYU Shanghai. We want to give some minutes.
Okay. So no worries, you don't have to do that. Yeah.
Otherwise, we can share it later, actually. That would be great. Yeah. If you can share it with us, we can actually send it around.
Absolutely.
Gabriele, if you have a very, very short one sentence advice.
Let's see. But to be honest, I'm still not like a super professional in this area. So in terms of career opportunities or caution, I think I still need some time. But what I can see is that now it's really a good time to be working on the city scale, because it's much easier for like regular citizens to get in touch even with like the people who design the city or the people who actually make the decisions. So there are many organizations doing community building, or like, what's the name, like urban hackers, or I heard in US, there are some people doing, there's like a city innovation officer. I heard of this kind of stuff. So there are lots of new things happening. And so, I mean, I think you can still take the traditional path. I don't see any problems with that, as long as you do it more responsibly than what has been done in the past. And or you can try to carve your own path, just like I'm clumsily trying to do myself with this new venture right now.
Great, thank you. And Xinlin.
I try to be very short. I think finding the narrative is very important. What kind of city do we want to live in? And what kind of city do we want our future generations to live in, and how do we build into it? Because I think a lot of different approaches in the cities right now comes from different worldview or narratives of what urbanism, what city is. And then if we don't sit down and really talk about, or to be on the same page of the narratives, we might come up with very different solutions or approaches to the cities. I find well, I don't want to say cautious, but I want to encourage everyone to be curious of this phenomena of technology, technical control of the cities. I personally do not have judgment, negative feelings about technology. It's all about how we use it. So again, comes back to the narratives and story. What do we want the city to be? And then how do we use the technology? And these two wings have to come together to fly. And then to look at this question, I find an opportunity recently because I started to working with rurals, especially in the Tibetan regions where nature is the fundamental principles of how humans deal with its environment. And I think also please be curious of ecology, just generally how nature deals with how nature operates, functions so well, or how human body, if a healthy human body works very well, all different departments of our bodies works with each other, and reciprocity, interaction with messages, and that's something we should learn and bring that knowledge back into how we look at the city might bring a lot of insights.
Thank you. I think that's how you called like diversity in culture with unity in nature, right? Your slogan. So I first want to give the floor to our other guest, Hao Guo. She has actually been working for 8 years for the NYU Shanghai Career Center. And she is currently heading the center and is working closely, of course, with New York and Abu Dhabi and on students' career development globally. So Hao, if you want to just introduce yourself, the center, and maybe some advice for the students indeed looking for global careers.
Thank you, Lena. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yes, perfect. That's a great question, Lena. A student frequently asks Career Development Center, what jobs can I do? What internships can I do? After hearing all this amazing sharings from the panelists, I would just give students, firstly, a very simple answer. It's not about what can I do, it's about what you want to do. So this is always the first question I ask a student. If student asks me, oh, I'm an urban planning major or I'm a major in social sciences, what can I do? And then I would ask back, what interests you the most? So explore yourself first before asking, you can do anything. From my perspective, it's about, what interests you the most, who inspires you every day, and then what kind of curiosity you have from viewing all those social issues. It's interesting, recently, Career Development Center, we are holding a big event called I Am Limitless Conference. I'm going to type the link here for in the chat box. Hold on. There's no link. No worries. I can send you guys the link later.
Yeah, we will send an update email with the video, the links. That's
perfect. Yeah, for some reason I cannot copy paste the link. So at Limitless Conference, we're aiming to develop a series of talks with young alums, with professionals, to give students different perspective in viewing the society. Not because you are major in business finance means you have to work in the finance industry. You major in global China study or social sciences, you have to work in some places. So it's all about your curiosity. It's about your door, your view of the world, and doors will open for you. So this is my general advice. There's a lot of advice. And speaking back to this urban planning initiative or new program, I think that's a great program designed to nurture student curiosity to the society and solve social problems. I think a lot of doors would open for the student, through this major or through this research, working closely with amazing people, amazing faculty member, would be also a great way to develop your research skill, develop your communication skill, develop your problem solving skill. I think that's the top 3 skills employers are looking for in the job market. Of course, we, Career Development Center, we prepare a lot of resources for you. I'm going to follow up with you, send you all the resources. But don't worry, if you have a question saying, I don't know what I'm interested in, no worries, come to us, come to Career Development Center, talk with a career coach, or talk to a faculty member to explore your career. For younger students, I think people need more time to explore yourself, to nurture your interests. Keep reading books, watch all kinds of televisions you're interested in, and then figure out what door interests you the most. Then let's figure out the way or approach to open it. So this is some general advice. Yesterday, we invited a CSR a company professional. She graduated from Wagner, actually, and she shared amazing story on social impact career, which means no matter what, you're in the business world, you're in the government, working for nonprofit, working for a foundation, if you find a problems you want to solve, you will have a great motivation in keep doing that. So we will create more programs and then coaching appointment or special walk-ins to nurture your interest in this. Of course, panel talks like today's will be also amazing approach for you to think about your career as a whole. And also, don't forget to utilize NYU community resources. If you're a New York student, definitely you can use Wasserman Center in New York. If you're a Go Local student here at Shanghai, we open all the resources for you from Career Development Center, no matter what campuses are you originally from. So coaching appointment, and then webinars, online talks, and then Handshake, job posting website. So don't only search urban planning job opportunity. There's no one type of the job called urban planning. So nurture your interest and then be beyond urban planning. You can do a lot. So this is some very simple advice, and then I would definitely follow up with you on some detailed resources, including a library resources on some database, which is going to be super, super helpful for you. Stay connected with us. Lastly, I want to highly promote a session this Sunday, I think March the 7th. It's a working at international organization. I think that would be a great place for you to think if you want to solve a social problem, no matter it's urban planning or design or political science. So we are going to invite one young alumni from NYU Shanghai working at Yunhe in Shanghai office to share her experience, and also very experienced, amazing lady, Hongxia, to share us her decades of experience in working at international organization. So it's March 7th morning, Beijing time. And then of course I will follow up with you on the detail.
We'll put it all in the email. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hao. So for all the students, if you still have questions for Hao, of course you can directly contact her or contact me, and I will forward your question. If there are any questions you wanted to ask for the panelists still, just let me know, or one of the organizers, and we can forward your questions. So thank you so much, first and foremost, of course, to our great panelists. So happy you could be here. This was really, really great and inspiring and helpful for the students. And I think it showed, without a doubt, like what an amazingly diverse things you can end up with if you're interested in the urban and even the countryside, right? How, you know, those two, we cannot forget how important both are in influencing each other. So I also want to thank, of course, our Vice Provost. I'm pointing at the screen, but everyone somewhere else. Kristen Day. She's been, of course, the driving force between the NYU Urban Initiative, and also Raquel Forrester, who is the Assistant Director of the NYU Urban Initiative and has been doing an incredible amount of work to organize this panel and lots more. I want, of course, also thank our Associate Vice President of the Office of Global programs, Tyra Liebman, but for us in Shanghai, she's still the Dean of Students, of course, and we all still miss her tremendously, students and faculty and staff alike. I recently spoke with a former student of ours and we talked about you. We still really, really miss you. And of course, my favorite colleague, Diane Gang. She is the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and the one who has been introducing me to all the secret treasures of Shanghai and also been, of course, very much involved with organizing this event. So, and thank you all students for coming here. Some of you have had a little bit of a push of me, but I'm really glad you came and I hope this inspired you and I hope you will be thinking about urban projects you're working on that might be, you know, suitable for also the what do we call it? What's the name of the competition? The showcase. Urban showcase. Yes. So thank you all very much for coming here. This was a really great great event and panel. And again, if students still have questions, don't hesitate to contact us. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Lena. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.